Hi, welcome back to Minismith. My name's Kieran. Today we're going to be taking all the stuff we've been making over the last 3 videos and bring them all together to finish off the diorama. We're going to be constructing the base and the environment for the scene, as well as posing the minis and a few finishing steps to tie everything together. So, let's finally finish this off. To start off with, we have the base. This is a wooden 9" by 12" plaque from Amazon. On top of this, to get the height I wanted at the back of the diorama, I used some old packing EPS polystyrene. This was glued in place with PVA, which is where I made my first mistake. PVA on wood, even thick stuff like this, can cause some warping, and along with the Amico sculptor mold I used later, we got some slight bowing on the bottom. To avoid this, consider using other non-shrinking glues like polyurethane glues. I built up the back to be a small hill for the statue to stand atop of, and also to introduce some different heights of the diorama. As it's a desert wasteland, I didn't want everything to just be flat. Once I was happy with the shape and the height, we can start to sculpt the actual landform. For this, I turned to sculpt mold. This stuff is absolutely fantastic for getting a natural looking landform to build on top of. It's strong and it's fast drying. There are a few varieties you can get, like this Amico sculptor mold I'm using, but there are others more tailor-made to terrain and dioramas, like the Geek Gaming modelling compound. This might have been a better choice for me, because the Amico stuff tends to shrink a little bit more as far as I know, and it also takes a bit longer to dry, which is ultimately what contributed to the bowing issue I mentioned earlier. When things like PVA and other shrinking adhesives soak into a porous material like wood or cardboard, they can cause some quite dramatic warping and bowing. I was lucky with this one because it was uniform and in one direction, so the piece still sat on the desk without wobbling. There is a fantastic video about the terrain tutor talking about why warping happens and how to avoid it, which I highly recommend checking out. Once the sculpt mold dried, I painted it brown just in case any of the ground cover came away, it would just look like dirt. I began to glue down parts of the diorama that I considered to be part of the landscape, things like the statue as well as these wall sections. They would have stood there for a long time and the landscape would have almost formed around them, so the next steps would really tie them into that landscape. These walls are some of the oldest pieces of Warhammer I own, if not the oldest. These were part of the 3rd edition starter set that my parents bought me for a birthday or Christmas when I was about 7 years old. These were stuck down with a little superglue for a fast grab and some PVA for a longer, stronger bond. Next up was the ground cover to start bringing it to life. I used Geek Gaming fast drying basing glue, both for the faster drying time, but also because it dries into a sticky residue rather than a full hard cure, which would keep everything stuck down better long term, especially against sort of abrasive handling. To get a realistic looking atomic wasteland, I used Geek Gaming Desert Sand and Stone. It has a mixture of different sand sizes and grit, as well as some small pebbles and also some very fine tile ground. All of this helps to make a realistic ground that has more varied texture and surfaces. I also made sure it settled on top of parts of the walls to make it seem like the deserts formed over and around these ruins, to give them more age and make it look like the desert sands are slowly blowing over and burying them. I sealed it all down by spritzing some isopropanol to seep into the sand so that when I then sprayed it with scenic sealant, it would all then be pulled into it completely to soak it. The capillary action of the isopropanol helps just to bring it down and penetrate further into that layer. I did it twice more for the strongest bond I could get. You might still lose a few stones here and there, but it's the best way to ensure long-term durability, especially if you're making stuff on gaming pieces. Before the miniatures themselves went down, I added a few extra pieces just to give the area a bit more life, like these old barricades and ammo boxes, as well as some of the grisly trophies. These really helped to give the piece some life, taking it from some ruin in a desert to a proper techno-barbarian camp with their ammo and fuel scattered around, as well as warning signs to their slaves or enemies. Then it was on to placing the minis. I focused on making a few smaller scenes, some standoffs or exchanges, so that the miniatures were interacting with each other, like the Thunder Warrior being shot by the Techno-Barbarian with a plasma pistol in the centre, or the execution behind them. These would really go a long way into creating a cohesive scene, and I tried a few layouts before deciding to finally commit to glue. As this was a diorama and not a gaming piece, I really wanted some interaction, not only between the miniatures, but also the environment itself. The best example of this is the large mutant at the back smashing through a pillar to the Thunder Warrior leader. This was done with a 3D printed pillar base that lined it up nicely with the height of the claw. I then made a few small bricks out of XPS foam and painted them in the same way as the pillar. These were then held together with tiny dabs of superglue. I then glued that to the claw in the direction of the swing so it looked like it was smashing it aside. I also added a spare spike and skull to add more elements higher into the scene more. This is very similar to how I did the barrels, where the Techno-Barbarian is being smashed back by a gunshot, sending the barrels tumbling. It's just done by adding small dabs of superglue to hold the pieces together. You could also potentially pin these for more strength if you were going to do this on something like a gaming base, but for a diorama this is easily strong enough. The last steps were to add blood, and lots of it. Big spatters for the chain weapons and drag marks in the sand where the wounded try and crawl away. This was done with Blood for the Blood God technical paint for the fresh blood, and then the blood that soaked into the sand I've applied some Agrax Earthshade. I then used a dry brush Barahoth blue to extend the lighting effect to the sand and the minis behind it to really bring everything into the same place. Once these were done, I painted black onto the base and onto the back, and the diorama itself was finally done. I'm incredibly proud of this piece. It's my first diorama and my first video series that launched this channel. It's taken a lot more work than I thought it would be, but I'm very, very proud of the finished piece. So thank you all very, very much for watching and following along with the series. Next time will be something quite different that I'm very excited for. So thank you all very much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.